Hello and welcome back to Northwestern Models TV, and today I'm going to show you how to put together the Ancorton Footbridge kit in double O gauge. So let's get started. So first things first, I need to open it up and see what we actually get in the packet. So we should have a number of very thin wooden frets, detail pieces, and of course the all-important sheet of instructions. So I'm going to have a quick read through those just to give me a vague idea of what I'm attempting to do, and then we can make a start on seeing how it all goes together. Right, okay, so this build isn't exactly complicated. However, I am going to break it down into various subsections because it's going to make it that little bit easier, and the instructions do allow us the ability to do that and still follow it through in a relatively reasonable order. So the first things to do is to build up the legs and the supports for it, and it is, as always, just follow the instructions. We'll just work through and get them together. Of course, there should be enough for both sides of the bridge. And it's a case of just knocking the pieces out as best you can. And what I'll do is I'll make up one piece on the video and then I'll make the other one up separately, just so you're not seeing me make the same pieces twice, just to help speed things up on the video as well. Right. So let's start with one of the longer legs, which obviously are the ones which go at the back of the bridge. There we are. So what we're going to need to do is make sure, and it says this in the instructions, is to make sure that we put the legs on with the etched side facing out. So if you can see there on the camera, we can see that there is some etched parts on one side but not on the other. You can see that they are very different there. So make sure you put the etched side facing out. And we put those into the relative base, which I think is going to be that way around. I don't think it matters which way up they actually go, I think they are the same both ways up. And that will make a start on this base. So let's get some glue on there. So glue I'm going to use is the good old faithful rocket card glue. I've used it for pretty much every laser cut kit I've ever built. It's good, easy to work with, and dries relatively quickly as well. It can be a bit runny, but you do need to give it time to dry out sometimes, depending on what you're doing. It depends how absorbent the material is that you're going to be working on. That way, yes I did. Making sure I've got that the right way around. And do the same with the other one. So I've got a bit of glue off there. So that's why you have a cutting mat to do your work on as well. They come in very useful instead of letting glue all over the table. Bearing in mind this is a very old table, so I don't actually care, but it's still nice to have a cutting mat to work on. So let's just wipe that up before it becomes a sticky mess and causes us problems. Obviously any excess glue, do try and wipe it off. And that's the first part of the column. So now we just need to find the top piece, which I believe is piece number 3. Yes, it is piece number 3, which is one of these large square pieces. All the parts on here are actually very easily to identify because they are all numbered, which is a wonderful added bonus. You do get some kits and they just want you to guess what the part number or letter it is, and it can get very, very difficult. So those that should just sit on the top of there, which it does. So let's put a bit of glue just round the edges of those. And it is one of those, we don't need a lot of glue on there, but just enough to hold it all together. Now with the top piece, we don't want it to go, we don't need to ram it on too far, because we want it to be able to stay flat on the top. So that's building up the first leg, let's say. So now we need to build up one of the smaller ones, which again is basically it's the same process, but instead of having two legs on it, you've actually only got one. And then I want the smaller one as well. Just while I'm cutting out, I might as well cut out. So there we are. Right, so we've got our three components. So we've got, and again, it does obviously, if you can, well, there's no real way of putting these the right way to outside until we've got the legs on. With the etching on, but we'll just make it work. So, to there, like so, and then a little one on the top. And again, just making sure it's not rammed down too far. Just let it. There we are. So here's the smaller front leg made up. So what I'll do now is make up the other two, and then we're ready to move on to the next stage of the build. Okay, so now I've got my legs made and they are to one side just drying. It's time to start on to the next bit, which is putting the walkway together. So we've got three main parts to the top. This is just the top of the walkway. Obviously we've got the base part and then we've got the two sides. Now these should slot together because there are lots of little tabs, which you may be able to see there on the camera. Little tab slots for them, so they should all go together fairly easily. And again, it does state in the instructions to make sure you put the etched side on the outside of the build. So I think that it is naturally the side that you're going to see more than you would the inside. So let's get the various parts out of here, and it's quite obvious in some ways which piece goes where, because one piece is long enough to do one side and the other is long enough to do the other one. So just go through and find all the little tabs which are holding the lattice work in, which is actually very, very fine and really, really nicely detailed on there, and that's going to be both a joy and a pain in the backside to paint, because the paint scheme I'll be doing on it will actually be a two-tone blood and custard style, Midland style paint scheme on it. When I get round to that, but obviously that won't be in the video. Let's get the walkway out. That's the main walkway, and lastly the other bit of lattice work. There we are, so get that out of the way. So those are 3 pieces. So first thing to do, if you ever can with the kit, is to try and do a dry run with it, just as it just gives you an idea of how it's going to assemble, and that, you know, if it does have tabs like this does, that it's going to line up nicely in the tabs and give us a nice style, which that looks like it's going to for that one. And let's just try the other one. Should fit in there, which again it does really nicely. And it is one of the joys of these laser cut kits, is that the vast majority of them, they are very, very good, and they do slot together really, really well, because they've been put together and designed by somebody who's, you know, obviously very good at their CAD and design work, and have worked out all the tolerances and everything that you're going to need to put the kit together, which makes life so much better and so much easier. So here we go. So again, remembering to make sure we got the lattice, the detail work on the outside. Let's see if we get this front piece on here. So, of course, it is, because it's 90 degrees, it is a little bit awkward to line up. But it needs to just hold it a little while the glue goes off a bit, which again is why I'm using the Rocket card glue, as it does dry relatively quickly when it wants to, without falling apart, preferably. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time, and we're in no rush. There we go. You see that's now just about holding itself on there, so it probably needs another couple of minutes or so. But that's fine, because I can now go along and we'll glue the edge of that one for this. It's one of those, you don't need a lot of glue. Some people put let's call it a generous amount of glue on. The reality is, for a lot of the kits, you don't need that. You really don't need to flood it with glue, because you think, well, the more glue on it, okay, yep, it's got more chance of stuff to grab hold of, but it's only going to grab where the glue is standing, so it's not necessarily going to always be the best idea in the world. But hopefully you can see there that we've got our 2 lines of lattice work, which obviously are thin and delicate, and obviously while the glue is setting, it's still a little bit fragile. But you can see now that that smaller one that I did first is now holding really, really well. It still has a little bit of flex in it, which is good. we'll need to see how the legs, for the stairs and the other side pieces will come in and match up, and hopefully it'll all pull it together and it'll be nice and tight then. Now, okay, so the next stage is actually to glue the tall supports that I made up earlier, there and there, to the underside of the walkway. So I just have to let the glue dry out a bit more, and then we can put those bits together. Okay, so what we're going to do to fix these legs on is, you might have noticed I've turned the main bridge span upside down. So this means we can see what we're attempting to do and get the legs in a relatively central area. So with the leg supports, there is a thicker base and a thinner top. So the thinner top is the piece that we're going to be wanting to stick down, and we're going to want to make sure that, okay, they go in at the end, but we want to make sure that they're square and fairly central in the space as a whole, on that end sort of platform area. So it's going to look as good as we can get it. So it's, you know, actively supporting properly as you'd expect it to in real life. So a bit of glue on there, and sort of lining it up as best we can. And that looks pretty good around there. And what I'm going to do is just add a peg in there to hold it together. And it's really that simple. And it is just a case of just letting the glue go off. So now do the same at the other end. Lining it up as best as you can. And then once you're happy, again, get a peg in there to hold it in place. So now we should be able to have a bridge. Look at that. So the next step is actually quite simple. It's going to be putting the little half landings on to the smaller supports that we made up earlier. So that's part 16, and you'll notice on part 16 that there is a little tab on one side of them, which I'm going to assume is for it to slot in to some of the stairwell action later. Now you might be able to just see the tabs on each end, just on one of the pieces. So again, with these, we're going to want to make sure that they're pretty central on there, just so they're nice and easy and look good. At the moment I've not quite figured out which side goes where, but I think I'm just looking at the other parts to see ideally which way round we want it to show out because of the little bits of detail on those legs. Yes, I think the bit with a tab on it needs to go the same side as the little details on the leg support. Well, that's the decision I'm going with, so let's hope for the best with it. So, just as before, just try and line it up as best you can. It's fairly square as you can as well. Oop, steady. Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll try that method and see what happens. Absolute worst case scenario is that they're on the wrong way around. But overall, in fairness, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference to the overall build at the end of the day. Let's add another peg in that one if I can. Small clamp. Oh yes, there we go, let's get a small clamp in there. Just to hold that in place just while it goes off a bit. So the next stage was actually to start putting the steps together. So obviously we've got the steps on this large fret here. So to construct the steps, glue the step support pieces, upper steps part 14, lower steps part 18, to the inner side of the handrails parts 10 and 11. Alright, so let's do one at a time, as it's suggesting. So obviously both sets of steps are going to make up the same kind of way. So again, I'll just make one side up for show, and I'll make up the other set afterwards. So part 14, upper steps part 14. So those are the upper steps, and these are the lower steps. Right, so those are the lower ones. Keep them to one side for a minute. Right, so the upper step supports obviously are going to need to go in on the inside edge of our leg supports. In that kind of area. I think it's just a case of mainly trying to line it up with the back edge as best as you can down to into that area, and obviously making sure that it's nice and square. So I'm sort of seeing how it goes together. Yeah, quite happy with that. So a bit of glue in there. Right. So so I'm lining up with a tiny little bit at the bottom of that piece and all that back edge as well. So, and hopefully you might be able to see there, we've got it in there. So I've lined it up along this edge here and just at the bottom there as well. It should make it quite correct. So I'll do the same with the other side of the steps, the other step. So by doing it that way, it means that you've got it as close as possible for the steps to align up afterwards. those ones. Right, so then the lower pieces will again line up on that back edge and at the bottom. It should make it nice and easy looking at it. Ooh, steady. There we go. So we should end up with a stairway that looks a little bit like that. So again, I've lined it up on this bottom edge and along there as well. So I'll do the same on the other side. So I hope you can see that this is actually a fairly straightforward kit to build so far. It's not massively complicated. But like every kit, it's a case of just taking your time with it, and you'll get there with it in the end. So my biggest recommendation to anybody making a kit is just take your time. Just take your time with it. There's no rush. There's no rush at all. So that's the inside matching pair of those together. So I'll let the glue go off on those properly for a bit while I make up the other pair, and then we'll see about starting to put it all together. Right, so now I've got the first set of steps done, the other set is drying. Let's see about putting one side together. It's pretty simple. Again, it's just lining up the all the tabs and things that are on the various other pieces, and I did get the detail right on the smaller steps supports. That little tab does need to be at the back, so it lines up with the tab in the stairwell there, about halfway down. So I think it's going to be easiest to probably glue one side, the larger side with the top piece on first, because then that gives a bit of stability to the piece, and allows slightly easier access in to get the other stand leg support in there at the bottom, or maybe put that on, so maybe together. But you can sort of see how it's going to come together. They'll basically work it however is going to be easiest for you. But like, as you can see, I'm just doing a little dry run with it here just to see that it does go together, which it does quite happily, because the inside piece doesn't have as much to sort of grip the rest of it with, which is why I think it's will be easier to put the longer piece on to everything else first. So let's do that. So I'll just put some glue just for the top area. So I'm just going to hold that in place. I've also put some on the joining areas for the back lattice work as well. So that's got something to join to, and glue in there. So I think again, just let that all go off for a bit first before we start messing about trying to get other pieces in there. Seems to be holding there. So let's get the little landing piece on. So put the glue on that, make sure I've got it the right way around. And slot him in there. There we go. Right. Yep, I think it's definitely going to be one of those leave it to dry. Yeah, highly recommend the leave it to dry point at this now, just so, because this is the fiddly part of it and we want the glue to be nicely dried, so it's going to hold everything together, so we're not trying to fight a lot of loose sticky pieces. It can just go together nicely. Yeah, let's let that dry for a minute. Okay, so that seems to be holding now, so let's see if we get this inner piece in, which again is actually going to make it a lot better, give it that extra bit of strength in there. And having just done a little dry run, I kind of know where the glue's going to be aiming for. So let's hope it doesn't all fall apart now. Yeah, so with this one, you want to sort of get the bottom piece in first, and then work the top. Again, if it doesn't want to attach to the other bits of handrail and so forth at the top, leave it till it's dried and then come back and ease them together. Get it on the bits that are important for it to hold together first. Yep, so I'm just going to let that dry for a bit, and then we'll do the other side. Okay, so after a little bit of trial and tribulation and a good deal of patience, as you can see, we now have a well, not very nearly, but a much more complete looking model. It is still very fragile, but it is now solid enough to be able to move on to the next step. Now, at these joints up here at the top between the sides and the cross lattice work, the corners are a little bit off, but I'm going to deal with that separately, and it's a case of just pulling them together and gluing them and letting the glue dry while you hold it in place. It may be easier to have some super glue, something like that handy, which will, obviously dry a lot faster and still hold it pretty well ahead of actually painting and so on. So the next step is actually to, well, incidentally, fit the steps. So I'm gonna just fit one to show you how it's done. it is easy enough to do. Cutting out from there, that's right. And you don't need to see me fit, a load of steps on it, as it's just the same process over and over again. So find your step piece, of which there are many, and this is where you may prefer to have some nifty little pliers, or you may prefer a pair of tweezers. And my tweezers, as my tweezers seem to have gone walkabout, probably got used on a layout project somewhere. Yep, they've disappeared off somewhere. So I'll have to use the pliers. But basically, it should be a simple case of slotting the step into one of the slots that we made earlier, and it is a case of just working your way up from top to bottom, or bottom to top, whichever works easiest for you, and just slot them in, bit of glue on each end, and away you go with it. So it seems to want to go in fairly easily with those, so I'm quite happy I'm going to use those. So let's grab a bit of glue. Again, don't need masses of glue on it. I think a lot of it, the friction will hold it in place. Let's just get it somewhere near the target. And just work it in. Yep, so I'm going to go from bottom to top, and I'm just literally starting on, well, hopefully you'll be able to see I've got that first step in there just above the landing area. I think it's going to be easier to go from bottom to top, because you can still see where you're going up the ladder with, essentially. So I'll continue this for however long it takes, and I'll see you when we're getting near the end. So, welcome back, and hopefully you'll be able to see there that the bridge essentially is more or less complete. All the steps are in, the frets are, everything is all pretty much glued in, and it is now a much more solid structure. It is still very fragile because of the nature of how thin it is and all that, but it is essentially done. However, there are still some parts to fit, and the first of these is some tiny little strips which fit down at the bottom of each handrail. According to the instructions, they go on the outside edge rather than the inside. So let's get a couple of those fitted, and then we are literally then down to the final few components, and this build is then at long last complete. And I say at long last, it's actually been a very enjoyable build so far. There's nothing really too taxing. I wouldn't say this was a beginner's kit by any means. I'd say if you are a relatively skilled modeller, you should be able to manage this pretty well, and it is a case of just following the instructions. It is as easy and as simple as that. So let's have that and put that to the outside, and then line it up as best as we can. Obviously you can see I'm trying not to handle the whole thing too much. There we go, so that's one. On the other side. Two. That's two on, so I'll just show you that you'll hopefully be able to see there now at the bottom of the handrail down here is now a little bit thicker, just as a nice sort of end post for the stairway. Straighten that one back up. Let's get these ones on. So, fitting the steps, time wise, it took a little while to do, probably about half an hour in fairness, all in, and that includes cutting out all the individual steps, gluing and working it in, each one in. So, obviously it was a good idea for me not to record all that, as it would have been waiting a very, very long time for me to get to the end of it and getting bored. So I made a good move there. But it was nice and easy, and like I said, I just took my time with it, got them in, glue it all together, and away we go. So that's right. So that is those done. Now that is the basic side of the kit done. However, we do still have a final fret to put out on here, and the first thing we're going to put on is these three. I can't see that, can you? Is going to be these three hoops. Now what these were generally for, they were to have lighting put on them, as for gas lighting, electric lighting, whatever, so that people could see when they're crossing the footbridge at night, which makes perfect sense to have them. But these are very, very thin and very, very delicate. So hopefully I've managed to extract them all. Certainly. Come on. There we go. At least one not behaving. Let's try cutting that one again. That's better, right. So, with these, the idea, like I said, was that they were used to hang lighting. As such, they fit down, or should fit down, the top along the walkway. There. Now, I think mine's leaning in a little bit too much, so I need to open mine out. So you might just be able to see the hoop there. But basically, you need to add in 3 hoops along there, and it's going to be simple enough to do. Like I say, first thing I need to do is open up that back edge, which I haven't glued to the corners yet, as you've just seen. So I need to probably do that first. So what I'm doing now is just adding in some super glue into the corners for the lattice work. Super glue is of course the Deluxe Materials Rocket Rapid. It's fast acting, does the job, used it on plenty of things before. Like I said, I probably ought to have done this a little bit earlier, but it's one of those things. It will hold it, just give it a bit of time to make sure it grabs it, because it is still quite springy. So it is one of those. Yes, it takes 5 to 10 seconds to set. Yes, of course it does. And at times it does actually. Other times it doesn't. And sometimes, like you've just seen, you can stick yourself to it as well. Right. So let's punch it out of the way. Let's see if we can get one of these hoops in from this end. So it looks a little bit better. So, with the hoops, I'm not sure, to be honest, whether they should go on the inside or the outside. Looking looking at that. I think, yes, I think it's supposed to go on the inside. Let's put them on the inside. Yeah, so as I say, what I'll do is I'll stick them in on there and spread them out accordingly. So these are probably going to need a bit of work to get them in, but essentially if you get 3 in equally spaced, I'm putting the first ones in, the first join in from the end, and then I'll figure out which is the middle, which is looking about there, and then you can get your 3 hoops in. Like I say, it's one of those, you could add these if you wanted to. You don't have to add them, but they do sort of add to the overall finish of the model. Obviously they need gluing in yet, which I'll do in a minute. But yeah, they are there. And then, yeah, so let me get those glued in and sort this out a bit better, and then we can move on to the last bits. Okay, so in order to solution that problem, pegs. You can never have enough pegs. We have now got the 3 hoops in there, which you might just be able to see there, there and there. So obviously we just need to let those dry. So these are basic closed pegs which you can get from most hardware stores, superstores or whatever. Right, so the last few pieces are these, which is piece number 21. And what these are called steam hoods, or smoke hoods, you might hear them referred to. Now these are basically designed to deflect the exhaust out of the chimney from steam engines out of the way, so it doesn't blast up in everybody's face. Well, that happens to be on the footbridge. So with these, you can see that there's 2, you should be able to see there's 2 lines there. All we need to do is just gently bend them down slightly along those 2 lines, and then they'll need to just be fitted underneath the main bridge. Now the actual fitment of them is very simple. You glue them on, stick them on from underneath. However, you're going to need to line them up with your track work. So once you've decided where your footbridge is going to go, and you've got it, you've built it to this kind of stage, that's when you can then go and put it into position on the layout, and then you can look from above to see where the track is going underneath, and then glue and bring it up and stick it on underneath. It's very simple to do, so it'll stick out a little bit like that on each side. So I'm not going to glue these on now because I need to go and see where they're going to fit on the club layout before I stick them on, so that they're in the correct place, so that they look right. Because it might be one of those, you might have the bridge going over some point work, or you might decide, well, you know what, I'm going to go for single track. This will do standard double track width on 00. That's what it's been designed for. But again, don't forget it's a platform mounted kit, so it's going to go from one platform to the other. But it should be there. But again, there could be variations of where you've got your track and other buildings and details you might have on your platform. So the station, platforms and the bridge can move side to side, and all sorts of things like that. So those smoke hoods are very much a case of fit them to your requirements. But other than that, that is essentially the bridge built. There we are, all finished. Job done. So there we are, that's how to put together that really nice, actually, Ancorton 00 double track footbridge, platform mounted footbridge kit. It's been a pretty easy build overall, like I said, but it's certainly not a beginner's kit, and this kit can actually be very easily modified and adapted to all sorts of different means. I know a number of people who have done that as well. Obviously I just need to build up a standard to show you what you get in the pack. So anyway, obviously all that needs now is, like I say, the smoke hood's going on and a coat of paint and sorting it, final bits of finishing on it, add a couple of figures or whatever, and then obviously mounting on platform on the new club layout. So anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do remember to give us a good old thumbs up. Also make sure that you hit that subscribe button as well, because that does help us out. And if you want, you could also suggest to me any kits that you'd like me to see, that you would like me to make up on video for you. Just drop us an email via the website, the company website, and the details of that will follow shortly. So until next time, happy modelling.